these initiatives to sensitize the human for the environmental issues. And the question is, how do you see the place of the religious feeling in sensitizing humanity towards greening and towards attracting non-profitable research? I think that religious feeling goes deeper to all people and can inspire and can give motivation to institutions and to certain people to sponsor even non-profitable research, like you said. How would you react to this? Thank
you. Yes, I agree entirely. I think I don't mind where the motivation comes from, and I think if people are motivated very clearly to do good by religion, no question. I mean, I absolutely agree with that. And the one thing I suppose is to be careful how one defines the good. And we know, taking the issue of population, for example, that not all churches agree that population is an issue. And I'm sorry, I don't know your doctrinal position, but at least some churches are not at all agreed with the idea that we should limit the world's population. I think that's hugely important. I do take very seriously the comment that I made that in the end that's our problem, and that we don't have to do anything draconian. I'm not advocating that in any way. That's why I didn't explore it at any more length. But just to comment that we should be realistic about how many people the Earth can support. There's a American, the Association for the Advancement of Science in America, the AAAS, is running a meeting at which I shall be speaking, among others, because I'm on a group with the Royal Society about this. And the title of the group session is the carrying capacity of the Earth. Something we should be quite clear about, you know, how many people we can actually support in order, particularly that they can flourish rather than merely survive. So long as we don't have any conflict about that, then I have no conflict. That, you know, it is obviously for some people, doctrine will direct us in ways which are not necessarily productive in that way. I don't know if you've got any you'd like to reply on that particular point. What's your own feeling? Is it? Oh, you don't think? Okay. But anyway, just to reiterate, I mean, I'm absolutely clear that I think it's great that people are motivated to help their fellows and to make a better future for the Earth. We have to survive. We really do. Thanks.
My question's about the internet, because I want to know your opinion on this, because I know that a lot of scientists now are using the internet to publish their findings in a very democratic way, which in a sense bypasses some of the formal institutions you were talking about and some of the competition that you were talking about. Especially, I think, in a global world between China, India, America, and so on, young scientists are starting to use this. What do you think?
No, I think it's very good to have this sort of informal communication as much as one can. I actually do set, I'm afraid, quite a bit of store, and not everybody agrees with this, but I set quite a bit of store by peer-reviewed publication, because the thing is, this sets sort of more specific steps. The difficulty with the blogosphere, because that's sort of what it is on the lab notebook level, is that there's a lot of it, and it's quite hard to figure out what's true and what isn't. I mean, simply true in the literal sense, nothing pejorative, you know, just have they got it right, or were they misled? And the process of getting a bunch of stuff together, writing a publication, having it criticized by people who know something about it, because that's all peer review is, you then end up with something which, on the whole, not always, is correct and you know, has been really put into a form that doesn't overstate the conclusions. So the publications, I think, of that sort continue to be useful. It was interesting, actually. It's exactly paralleled in the media. I had a brief discussion with one of the journalists earlier this afternoon about the blogosphere and the decline in people buying print newspapers, or indeed online versions. You know, everything is now done by bloggers. I mean, it's great, you know, if you trust your blogger, but the truth of the matter is that nothing replaces a well-written article which somebody has thought about. You then get a copy of the newspaper so you can think about it rather than just quickly whipping through it. So there's a way in which we somehow quantize, I think, our learning in this way, which is valuable. So I think it's valuable, but I don't think it will replace the traditional publication, although, of course, the actual mechanics of how that's done, getting more electronic, will change.
John, thank you so much for a smashing talk. I know you don't want to be called Sir John, so. Thank you also for providing, for fleshing out the main theme of this conference. I was thinking in terms of investigating the limits of the market, but you explained very vividly that there are areas that there is no market in the first place. And I wonder, obviously, as a professor of financial markets, it hurts me to feel that there is no room for a market. But I wonder, who is going to tell us where we should put the boundary? How are we going to demarcate the areas, especially the areas of science and innovation, where commoditization and for-profit is a good thing, and where there is no room for commoditization and for-profit activity? The Manchester Manifesto is a good start. We should say that another signatory, apart from yourself, John Harris, and a few others in this room, is of the Manchester Manifesto is Joe Stiglitz. But again, Joe, like myself, would tell you that markets fail and you should regulate them and readjust them. One of the many great points that you've made here today is that there are areas where, like atmospheric air in the space, there is no market, and trying hastily and violently to create one will damage human species, as a matter of fact. But where should we put the boundary?
Yes, it has to come, doesn't it, from endless discussion. And of course, there's another great fraternity who we're leaving out and talking about economists, lawyers. And that's in the end, you know, everything has to be done in the most minute way of arguing and discussing. And that's how we're eventually going to get the regulation of the Earth's climate, the regulation of all the other things we referred to this evening. And I think there's no escape. I hate it. I much prefer broad brush solutions that I can understand. I can't follow all this detail. But in the end, it's detail that will do it. And of course, I mean, this is not a novel idea, is it? I mean, the regulation. I mean, in fact, I was thinking somebody might pick me up on this and would say, well, of course the world's market is regulated. There's all sorts of regulations. We don't actually have an unregulated global free market. So what I'm actually saying in that case is that in some areas I simply think it's not regulated enough. But then, as you say, we have to negotiate. Or I'm saying we have to negotiate in order to specify how those regulations will operate. I think what is important is that we all get in there. An example of what I regard as a bad regulation is the TRIPS agreement, the Trade-Related Intellectual Property Rights Agreement, where the people in the room were mostly people from the record industry initially, who were quickly joined by representatives of Big Pharma, and they put something together which actually is very incomplete and only latterly had some slight and really rather unworkable flexibilities added to it. We're seeing the same thing happening again now over the very worthy effort which is being put out to get rid of the fake drugs which are circulating on the world's markets, especially in some of the developing countries. Sub-Saharan Africa is full of them. But they're doing it in a way which is benefiting the big players, is mixing the whole thing up with intellectual property. And that's because, again, the right people not all the correct people are in the room. It's mainly being negotiated by customs agencies, and again, Big Pharma in the room there. So I think, yes, we have to have negotiations, but we need to have negotiations with all the players. And that's painful, but it will be done and will then be right.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I've really enjoyed it. Given the focus was on the role of universities in greening humanity, and it comes 2 days after the Lord Brown report on the future funding of universities in England, at least, and you're giving your talk a few days before October the 20th, when the UK Comprehensive Spending Review reports. I would not be at all surprised to learn that either you personally or your institute made a submission to that report. But if the government, of course, is not bound by the report gives a number of recommendations, many of which have already been highlighted and trailed, even if you haven't read the full report. I wonder what you would be, if the government asked you to comment on those recommendations and the future funding, what would you be saying to the government in the UK?
Well, I'll just restrict myself to a generality because it's not time to get into details, and I'm not really competent to do that anyway. But I think that the UK is being too eager to cut this whole area of universities, and this applies both to research and teaching. I think we are actually cutting more than most countries, than most developed countries. And it's a mistake. I believe America is not doing this. I don't think France or Germany are doing it to the same extent. And they recognize that it's really a very small fraction of the domestic economy which is spent on research and teaching is actually very, very good value and is exactly what's needed, much more than bankers' bonuses to bring us in the end stably out of recession. So I think it's very short-sighted, and that's what I would say, I do say, when I'm asked to these policies. But if I'm pressed about exactly how the line should be drawn, I'm not competent to do that. Whether there should be some small cut or no cut, I'm not sure. But certainly they're cutting far too much. Is that helpful?
Most of the problems in green economy, ethics, innovation, and science come, I think, from a political decision by governments. The world is ruled by the G8 or G20. Why, and this is my proposal inspired from your speech, why do not the Nobel Prize winners form a de facto government to rule the world affairs? Thank you.
Well, I don't know how many Nobel Prize winners would agree with what I'm about to say, but I don't think Nobel Prize winners have any particular validity in terms of governance. In fact, I do think it's one of the very strange things about getting a Nobel Prize is that immediately one is invited to talk about all sorts of things of which one knows very little. It's a very dangerous temptation to which I have to confess I'm succumbing a little bit. But by working with John Harris and his associates, I feel at least I have a sort of respectable platform to speak from. So I don't think that particular one is good, but what I would draw your attention that we are going beyond the G8, we're going to the G20, the G88, the middle developing countries. There are a lot more there's a lot more people forming these multilateral associations. The danger, and I don't know if the Nobelists will be helpful here at all, is that the rich countries, and specifically the US and the European Union, are both eagerly rushing to form bilateral agreements. Well, China is just buying everything. The other two are forming bilateral agreements with countries which impose on them as so-called TRIPS Plus agreements, where they increase the power of intellectual property and all sorts of other trading rules like data exclusivity and so on, and are really taking us backwards away from the world United Nations to the world of divided nations. Now, will the Nobelists help with this? I fear not. I'd love to believe you're right, but I think there'll just be one more think tank which doesn't really have much power. What we should be supporting are the multilateral processes of the UN.
Don't forget that you are in the country where the wisest man on earth was created, Socrates. Now, Socrates...
He's an ancient.
He did not believe in democracy.
Yeah.
He said that the world should be ruled by the sophos, sophocracy, not democracy. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.